Hello, nearly good afternoon now. Let us talk about iOS. I'm sure that you all know what iOS is, which is the operating system for Apple for mobile devices. And many people in the industry consider that iOS is probably the most secure mobile platform. And this is what we will be discussing in this presentation. We will look into whether it is as safe as they say, so that you can draw your own conclusions. Which is the latest iOS version? Okay, 10.1 already. Well, it should say 10.0.1 because when they launched 10, iOS 10, they had already 10.01, and then we may wonder why 1 hour later they released a different second version. The thing is that Apple forgot to patch a vulnerability which was quite critical. It is one of the 3 Pegasus vulnerabilities that allow you to have full remote control of the device, and it has been used in a real environment against the defender of human rights. That person had been attacked, and then it was a critical vulnerability. So my presentation will be divided into sections. A section that focusing on malware for iOS, state of the art right now, type of techniques that are being used, and also, my presentation will be a bit technical, so I will not dwell into lots of detail. So if you have specific details later on, approach me and ask them to me. And now we will also be looking at a number of vulnerabilities which are very common, like a string, digital certificate, software updates. This may sound very normal, however, these are not as perhaps as secure as they should be. Let us start talking about Apple's, and which is the state of the art. And basically, you are well aware of the market share per country at international level. Apple, in terms of mobile demand, has between 15 and 20% of market share, depending on when the new device is released, and that's what explains the ups and downs in that graph. And then Android has a larger market share because of has a wider price range. Here, for we have been having iOS for 10 years now through several devices, and now I want to share some figures with you so that see what you if you guess the actual figures. So when iOS 6 we had 200 vulnerabilities, for iOS 7 we had 80 or 90. iOS 8 at that time we had 272 altogether. Here I'm talking about official vulnerability. Some are more critical, others are less critical. How many vulnerabilities do you think iOS 9 had? Who thinks that we had more or less? Anyone would like to guess it, to guess a figure? Who believes that we had more vulnerability in iOS 9? Well, you are not hopeful people, so everyone wants to say more. You are negative. Yes, you are right. You are right. 342 vulnerabilities in iOS 9. And what about iOS 10? Well, same question. Who thinks that number of vulnerabilities was higher? Okay, again, well, negative attitudes, okay? So iOS 10 in Watch OS, which is the operating system for the smartwatch, because it shares very many modules, libraries, kernels, and with iOS and Mac OS. So that's the OS for desktop or mobile. Well, that's the number number of vulnerabilities when iOS 10 was released was 7. And I said, well, something is going wrong here. This is just impossible, looking at the prior statistics and then seeing what happens every time they launch a new version. In the past, some of them were 170, 70, and said 7. No, this cannot be true. And yes, I was right. 1 week later, it was found that it had 49. And why a week later? A week later because many of them were shared with OS X. The OS X was not in the market yet, so therefore Apple didn't want to disclose the potential vulnerabilities that could have an effect on iOS, and they just wanted to wait for to have the available version with the fixed vulnerabilities. And well, here we can see that there is a problem in the industry. Unless safer, more secure code is developed, we will continue to have so very many vulnerabilities. So therefore, that is a bit of hope. Okay, you can continue to make having a career in security, as well as your children, as well as your grandchildren, because problems are not being resolved from the root. And now, malware. When we talk about malware, many people think about that. Yes, it is true there is lots of mobile malware for Android, but not only for that. And that's what is important, and that's what I want to take a look at now. So, curiosity now, where some of the sayings or reflections that I'd like you to bear in mind throughout the presentation is the following. If something does not exist, or if it has no name, it does not exist. You know that Apple doesn't want iOS to have an antivirus or similar security software, and the vulnerabilities and malware seems to be not classified. So apparently, if it does not exist, it has no name. So this is a list of the last malware specimens that we saw last year as well as this year. So here we have all these long lists, and will not dwell on that. I will focus on two critical aspects. How do we distribute apps? Well, sometimes out of the official App Store, and then I will also focus on how APIs are abused. So that is to say, to gain more privileged access to the platform. So when it comes to distribution out of the App Store, I'd like you to stick to this. Apple has a number of development programs for individual developers, another one more corporate in nature, so that you can distribute apps within your corporation. And this program is very interesting because apparently through that program you can distribute applications without going through the App Store. App Store is where Apple has greater control about these type of apps that are distributed. And then we also discovered from research that we did was that any user could install apps as long as they are signed by a corporate developer working or involved in this second program that I just mentioned. So that means that two taps will help any user to install any app that developed through that corporate program. So two taps only. How does it work? Very simply. Developer requires his corporate certificate, $300 per year. I also need a server with HTTPS because there is a need to use an encrypted server, and then this generates the malware app. It's prepared. It is given a provisioning profile to distribute it in physical devices, and that's it. It is uploaded in the web and then sends out a link for people to download the app from iOS. So the link looks like this, like it says on the screen. And here it has to use HTTPS, and then it points at a plist file, which is an XML, and it has this link, and that's where we have the IPA package of the iOS application that we will be installing. Notice the look and feel of it. So this came out because I was giving a training on mobiles, and then students came out and said, do you know that there is an app which is being distributed out of the App Store? This was legit, and this was to try out an app to see whether it worked in China and in Spain. And this is a tweet where someone says, try out that app. It is an app to measure the bandwidth of your connection. So you tap on it, and then you see that link, the ITMS, and then it asks me whether I want to install it, and I say yes, and then it starts to be installed out of the App Store. That occurred in iOS 8, and it started to be used, it was used to distribute malware, and therefore Apple took a number of messages. So you see here, when you install the app, there is a new profile. There's a new profile associated to the developer that developed the app, and then the application is installed, and that's it. So here we have the profile, and here we see the you only need to click on the icon. We see details of the developer, and then the application works perfectly all right. And now on the right, we can see exactly the same situation, but for iOS 9. And this is for you to take a look at the measure that was implemented by Apple to mitigate that. This is basically about tapping on it. The link is similar, virtually similar. We tap on it once, and then the system asks me whether I want to install it. I accept it, I say yes, and then installation starts. However, what happens now, that if when I go, well, once it is installed, it doesn't allow me to run it, because it says that it comes from a mistrust developer or untrust developer, and it asks me to do something more. Something more is going to this profile and then to say that I trust the developer. So once you do that you set the system that you trust the developer, you validate it, and then you can run the app. So this is giving instruction to victims and say, look, if you cannot run the app, don't you worry, you go to adjustment profile, then you say that you trust the developer, and that's it. This is a malware that has a number of instructions with it. And then we also mentioned the APIs, the private APIs. That is to say, private libraries that are available at iOS that attackers or malware creators are using. So for you to have a feel, basically what they have found is a model where dynamically you may invoke classes or objects of those private classes, and then the review process does not detect that dynamic creation of the classes, and sometimes the review process of Apple is skipped or bypassed. If I distribute an app, as we have just seen, with corporate certificates of the developer, and if I do that out of the App Store, will anyone check whether I'm using private APIs or not? No one will check that, isn't it? So therefore, it is a good method. If I combine both methods, I can take advantage of the APIs, and I will end up distributing my app. This is a real example of a malware which is being distributed in China in websites, and it was a link to watch adult movies. And here we see the ITMS services, then the plist, then you clicked on the link and then to download an app, and then your mobile phone was compromised with very many capacities to find out the app that is open, then to push ads as you were navigating, that is to say, to gain more and more control of your device, mobile device. And now, to complement that, it was very interesting to see that this malware specimen find a capability that iOS had that we didn't know it, where you can hide the app icon so that it doesn't show. So you install the app, the malware, but you don't see an icon. You don't have an icon. It is just an instruction in the file property file, and it is asking the app to hide the icon. And why was that functionality there, available to everyone? We could wonder that. We could ask ourselves that, but perhaps, well, that's it. And then this trick, this thing of hiding the icon, it is fixed, has been fixed by Apple now. And then another way of hiding icons that was also applicable to iOS 9 is this one that says on the screen. Let me show it to you. That basically, I take the icon that I want to hide. For instance, I take it to the first screen. The first panel is full, and then I try to create the icon group, and then I drag it down, and then it disappears. It goes away. So now the icon is no longer what it was in the beginning. So this trick works only temporarily. If I start the device, it shows up again. But if I want to hide this icon to install my malware, I could do it in this fashion because very many people do not take a long time to restart their mobile phone. And now let us talk about the distribution, new capacities and vulnerabilities for developers. It is in your hands. It is in your hands to decide whether this is a vulnerability or a opportunity. So is this a bug or a feature? It is a feature for those of you who were not clear about it. So this is basically about it. You know what WWDC is? Who knows that? What is that? Perfect. It is the annual conference of Apple developers. Everyone goes there to see what is latest in app by Apple. So last one took place in San Francisco summer. So 2 million, 13 million, what do they stand for? What do you think? Well, first one, 2 million. Well, pop it up. Users, well, Apple have many more than 2 million users. What else? What else could it be? Developers. Well, there are more developers than 2 million, but stick to it. And then markets, applications in App Store. Yes, that stands for the number of apps in App Store. And say louder. If they had 13 million apps out of the App Store, surely Apple will take stronger measures because the business model will be just ruined. So 13 million developers, registered developers. So 2 million apps, 13 million registered developers. Does this resonate to you? Well, we could go and say, well, each developer may have at least one app. And what happens with the remaining 11 developers? What are they developing? I just don't know. I don't have any data supporting that. I'm just showing you this information, and it is up to you to draw your conclusions. And then it seems that in the Apple development model for a long time, you couldn't take an app and then install it in your physical device, nor as a developer, nor locally. For that, you needed to have developer accounts to work with the simulator, but you had to work with an official developer account. They know who you are, you paid to have that account. But recently, with the introduction of Xcode, they introduce a functionality that is referred to as side loading. So it means from your machine through USB, you can install an app. And for that, you don't really need to be an official Apple developer. Anyone may register as a developer, free registration. You register with an email account, and then you go ahead. And then do you think what you could do with that mechanism? That's a new way of distributing applications out of App Store. If I have access to your device for a few seconds, I connect it with a USB to my team, and then I just install this gift for you. And if on top of that I can hide the icon, so you see where I want to get at. So this is as simple as that. When you install it, you see that the screens are very similar to the one that we saw before. It asks you whether you want to install the app, and then you get the profile of the new developer. You say that yes, that you want to install it. So official distributors or developers and non-official ones share a number of characteristics, but if you are a free developer, that you have all you need to distribute malware. So Cider allows you to take any app to Troyanize it with malicious code and then to distribute it. You distribute it as a valid app through what I said before. For instance, the side loading. I take your phone, I access to it for 10 seconds, and then I access to it through USB, and then I inject malware. The thing is that this tool could, I tell you how it works. There is video. So I may inject the malicious code to the app, and then the app runs perfectly right with both the legit code and the malware. And because the app is the same as the original one, but tampered with, so it has also access to your details, Skype details, etc. So make this general to any app. For instance, imagine that it goes to your Gmail. It will have access to all your information stored on Gmail. This is a tool that is based on open source tool, and you can tamper with it perfectly all right. And well, now I will play a quick video. So I will tell you how it goes. We have a tool that generates the Trojanized version for the app. You're going to say, I want to take Skype and I want to inject this code. And this is a code that we often use in intrusion tests or in security audits, where you can inject or manipulate or tamper with the behavior of the app in the memory. I will go fast through the generation side, the generation parts, variant. You sign it with your certificate as a free developer. So here we have Skype, but we have the tampered with version. It tells you that it is untrusted developer. Then you go to profile adjustment, you authorize the developer, and this installation process takes only a few seconds. We authorize the developer, and then we have this Skype. This Skype looks like normal, but it is not normal. Has the code of the attacker. Well, it has infected code in it. And when we run it, because it has this additional code, we have the capacity, we can connect to the device and to modify, to change the memory of the app which is running. So therefore the attack that will be launched in the video shows us how we can change any component of the app. So for instance, here in the field with the username, this is a text that we are sending out to the network through this connection. So we'll forward it a bit, and now you can see how the command is launched and the text that shows up. So we are in the framework of, we are manipulating, we are tampering the memory of iOS apps. So basically that we have apparently a normal Skype, but a Trojanized Skype. So we have Skype, and now it is being controlled by the attacker. So Apple resolved this problem, and the same researcher that found this attacking technique found another one as well. And then Apple said, okay, now if you replace an app that has been modified, then it will not have access to the prior data. And the technique used by the attacker was the following, so that you can see that there are always alternatives. Okay, I do a backup of the device, I store data, then I installed my Skype app, Trojanized, and then I do a dump I dump the backup of the mobile, and now the Skype has the very same data, but the Trojanized Skype has the very same data. So therefore, I gain control again of the user details and credentials. And I will skip 2 slides now. And now the last jailbreak, which is publicly available, which is Pangu 9 or 9209 3.33 uses these techniques. It uses the site loading technique that we saw before for local installation of an app through USB. You run the app, and then it exploits the vulnerability and gives you full control of the device. So it is the first time that we have a jailbreak with an app doing sign loading instead of exploiting it through remotely or via iTunes. It has been the case so far. So this is a summary of how you can distribute apps out and in the App Store. So it is very important for you to remember that this long list here is about malware apps that have been in the App Store. Number is not very big, but this is for you to see that the certification process of App Store can be bypassed, allowing at the end of the day having people introducing malware apps. And well, 9 of 10 cases there, and here we have a higher number for the apps that are distributed out of the App Store. So this is the end of the first part of the presentation, and now I'd like to tell you about a number of vulnerabilities that I have found in iOS and also in Apple mobile environments. They have been reported at that time, and however, perhaps they were not seen as sufficiently critical. And then this summertime, I went back to them and I said, well, see what happens with these ones for the latest versions of iOS, for iOS 9.32 and iOS 10. So I just would like you to reflect about it, and then we will see whether Apple should do something more in that regard or not. So, well, Apple says that iOS is one of the most secure devices, mobile devices, and yes, we know that they have great capacities with security in claim. So, well, to store the representation of the fingerprint, doing encryption, decryption, but perhaps there are other things that should be fixed as well, and they are not being fixed, and therefore I hope that this gives you food for thought. So, lock screen. It is a main element to protect your device just in case someone gets hold of it.
And you need to tune up your vocal cords for voice hacking, so voice attacks, because we get more and more digital wizards, such as Google Assistant or Siri for iOS, that allow you to interact through the app with this lock screen. Well, I've always been interested, and that was September 2014, and we built a resource that we have updated on DinoSec blog with each iOS version, which specific vulnerabilities allow us to skip the lock screen, so that you understand and keep it in mind. This is just an example. We've known about this since 2011. With each version, it is updated. This was actually found by a Spanish researcher, by the way. It is locked. It is this 6-digit PIN. It was iOS 9 then. Locked again. And so the idea is to skip, to circumvent it. So first, second, fourth attempt, it's all about bypassing it, and it's our fifth attempt. And before we enter the last one, it presses home at the same time. It is a brace condition. By pressing home, it activates Siri and asks, what's the time? And Siri shows you time and time areas or zones. And you say, well, I want a different one. When choosing it, you can enter text to select it. And I can select it saying I want to share it with a different application. Let's say SMS. And so I'm all the way into SMS. I should not be there. From this time zone, I've moved into SMS. So what does an SMS need? A text needs a recipient to get it. So if there is a recipient, I can choose one. Where from? Contact list, right? So if you can choose a recipient, I can see the contact. I can even create new contacts, and that's what I said. I'm in. The contacts in there, what do they have? Pictures, right? So I'm all the way into pictures, into the gallery, and I can see all the pictures and erase them and whatever I want. So see, something as simple as saying Siri is enabled because it's easier and I talk to it on the lock screen, and through time selection I can get to contacts and can manipulate them all, choose the pictures and manipulate them, tamper with them. It's just an example, one of the many vulnerabilities that had effect and still have affected and still affect the lock screen. Another typical question, digital certificates. We used to encrypt and verify authentication in most of our communications. Same here. If there is no CVE, maybe there is no vulnerability. This is another approach we should consider. What's this we have here? What's it? Typical case where you get a certificate mistake because it cannot be validated, it's not trustworthy. Three options here. You can cancel, go into details, or move on. If you go into details and check out the details and you say, I trust the certificate, where does it end? The user, I mean. Let me tell you. Double button for mass destruction, right? What was that? So this is a nuclear panic button we all fear someone might press, and that's all I'm going to say about it. What just happened if you've pressed any of these two buttons? Your iOS device has accepted the certificate as valid, and so you can log in, and a potential attacker, if in charge of the certificate, will capture our traffic. For how long is it valid, that certificate? Sorry, what do you reply? Say it out loud. Forever and ever. Forever means that it'll be there, your attacker, able to attack the traffic for that website whenever they want, unless you've got the factory settings restored. It doesn't matter you delete the history, that you rebooted the system, the browser, doesn't matter. It'll be there forever. This is serious, right? Say it here. Basically, we are over there. This is iOS. We log on to a web. You've got a man-in-the-middle attack. There is an invalid attack certificate, and so there's a certificate error. And we get the details, but we don't accept it. So far, so good. So what happens if I do press accept? So back to the beginning, log in, same certificate error. If I say move on, that's it. I just do it once, and the attacker is already intercepting my whole safe secure HTTPS traffic. Doesn't matter whether we deleted all that certificate, even if we delete it and we go back in, there's no error. The man is in the middle getting all our traffic. How can we delete it? There's only one option, and it's doing it big. Go to settings and delete all network settings or all the settings in the device. If you delete it, I lose all the Wi-Fi networks that were set up and so many other elements. Wouldn't it be easier, I wonder, it is 2016, to have this panel saying these are the certificates you accepted and then delete the ones you choose? I don't think it's too much asking, but it seems it is, because we don't have the capabilities. So something else that it's interesting for security is to keep your device updated. We all know that. It makes sense. If a vulnerability gets a CVE, there is an ID is allotted, and so the manufacturer has repaired, and we can sleep at ease, right? What do you think? Can we sleep tight? Just like that? Who verifies whether a vulnerability that the manufacturer claims has been sorted out is being actually resolved? Sometimes that nagging researcher that is using months to look into it is the one who checks whether it's been done. And the nagging one, that's me. So the repairs might not be adequate. Maybe a brittle will not work, but you know what I mean. So I did conduct some researches with iOS updates where they could be tampered with, where you could freeze your iOS device and basically make sure that it would never update again. It was notified to Apple. They did repair it, but only partially. There was a sealant option that was that the device could be attacked and you could circumvent the current update, meaning there is this one version, there's a new one released, and you say your device, no, you've got the last one, but it doesn't update. Since it's not updated to the new one, but the new one is public, you can see the exploit for the new one and can attack them on the device. So there is an impact. If it was even worse in the past, of course, when you could say, do not update until 2013. 30, sorry. And so you think up to 2030 I have plenty of updates, but still important. So you're still chasing it, reporting it back to Apple. And what's interesting, and I found it later on, is the fact that Apple Watch, this is a smartwatch, would update in the same way and was vulnerable to the same item. So you could attack it and freeze the update, same as with the phone. Remember what I said, same code inherited from different devices that inherit vulnerabilities? This is another problem that it's solving within the industry. This is an example, just briefly. I will have access to, well, let me have access to your settings, see the version. At the time of the video, it was iOS 9.3.2, so fully updated. Back then, there was no attack, and now there's been an attack on the watch. The watch version was 2.1, as you can see on the slide. You can see that the watch for the tests had an older version. I think it was 2.0. I'm not sure. We'll see it in a minute. And it's trying to update. So there's been an attack released. And you see 2.0 is the latest. And no, the truth is that it was 2.1.1. And so it was still vulnerable, same as iPhone and iPad devices were. Luckily, for iOS 10, finally, Apple started using HTTPS for all the communication regarding software updates. So it is a bit more limited, or somehow there is attack mitigation, meaning that all of you that raise your hand saying that we are doing worse, well, what I mean is that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and if we researchers keep insisting on manufacturers for them to do things right, it seems in the end we will manage. So I guess it is a good message to keep on insisting. And before Q&A, let me finish with Wi-Fi. Quite common in the daily use of mobile devices. And so, out of the vulnerabilities spotted and reported back to manufacturers, because let me remind you, this initial list of vulnerabilities, we did the maths and understood why they would go up, are the ones officially recognized by the manufacturer. But many other aren't, as this one, or the one we just checked with the web browser, that it was not acknowledged either. So, the ones that are acknowledged or recognized are the very critical ones. Let's see if that's the case. Different research conducted for Wi-Fi networks and mobile devices, we found a few vulnerabilities. There's this one on which we'll be focusing, where you can have a false hotspot and you are spoofing the legitimate one. So the mobile believes that what's visible is the one for your organization, but it's actually a false one, that it's taking the place of the one of your organization. It will be connected, and the attacker will eventually intercept your communication. And as part of my analysis, I had this fun fact. There were a series of scenarios, and when the device logs into the Wi-Fi network and finds the false hotspot, I'm not meaning here open Wi-Fi, right? But the highest Wi-Fi security, business, WAP2 level. There, it can be that there is a certificate mistake or error sent by the issuer. So when you see the certificate, what are the options? You can accept it, the certificate, or accept it. It seems there's something missing, right? a cancel or not accept. Well, that was it. There was no cancel. That's a fun fact. But Michael Santos was given this CVE because that cancel button was missing. Probably, I don't know. He was at one of my presentations or he found it himself. And Apple said, this is a serious vulnerability. We need that button there. Still, as it happens, the core of the vulnerability was basically that option of spoofing the Wi-Fi network so that the client device, if not properly set up, it logs onto the Wi-Fi network and reveals the deepest secrets. Let me tell you, this is a business network. You've got username and password, and you can get the server certificate. You may validate it or not. Same with the website. You can cancel it. Here it is, that button here in this specific scenario. And problem is, an attacker could impersonate, could spoof your company's certificate, and they are virtually the same. It's only the fingerprint that cannot be faked, the cryptographic one, but they can say they are part of your organization, that it's been issued by the same certifying entity, etc. So once you set the attack scenario, building a false hotspot or attack spot, what do you get? This is the Wi-Fi, it's on, there is a false attack spot, the mobile device thinks it's legit and tries to log, and so if there is a radio certificate that the user accepts, what happens? What do you think? Just the same as with the web browser. It stays in there forever, and it's a valid certificate forever and ever. But it's probably the same code that is processing certificates. Otherwise, what could an attacker do? Let me show you. So there is this false hotspot. Client or mobile device tries to log, and what happens? It is because of the false hotspot that you force the client to reveal the credentials of the user, that will be username and password. And in the business network, corporate network is not just the Wi-Fi, but it's also Windows, it is email, web servers. This one has no CV. Cancel, the one with cancel, yes. This is not been acknowledged, and yet iOS 10 is still vulnerable, so take it as you will. As of late, I like to finish my presentations using some Spanish saying. So, this is a saying in Spanish, and we've seen so many side doors and apples. You might know this saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So here it is, an apple a day keeps the intruder away. Leave it there and take it as you will. We are done here. If you have questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Muchas gracias. Preguntas.
Questions? Comments, remarks? No questions? I'll try to hear what you say and I'll repeat the question myself. It is even worse than one could initially picture. So you have the default setup and back, so the certificates go away. That's good. It's nice that it gets deleted if you restore from your backup, but the backup you've got was after accepting the certificate comes back and it's accepted as valid. It's not just that. If you update the operating system, an update seems quite important for the system, right? Still vulnerable. In all the tests that I mentioned, I did it again this year, 932, updated it to 10, and the same certificate you saw on the clip, it was still on 10, and it was still vulnerable without that certificate error. So you need to reset default factory setting, or there's no other option. There's no manual deleting option. Any more questions, comments? This one. So ask me one as you get the microphone. I got in a bit late. I would like to know if later today or maybe tomorrow we will give the same presentation. And luckily I was not supposed to be here, but I am, and I'm happy to be. But it seems there was a mix up with the presentation. I will not repeat it. And all what I've shared here will be available. Do you have leaflets? Yes, there will be. The whole presentation will be there, plus something else if you want to look deeper into it. Congrats on the presentation. It's been so very interesting. Let me just tell you that Apple, maybe it's consolation for Apple, and they don't acknowledge it, but the radios and phishing is for everyone, for computers and Android, everyone. Well, let me add something. This vulnerability that this spoofing or phishing is from 2008. A dear friend, Joseph Wright and Dan Antoniewicz, a different researcher, that talk about it back in 2008, so it was 8 years ago. Then we looked into the mobile side of it to see if we had learned from the past, and luckily in initial research we saw that all of them, Windows Phone, BlackBerry, iOS, all of them were vulnerable. And maybe this one was the most robust one, because you need to have a CA, they do a bit better. As for Android, there's a problem because you cannot specify the radio server name, so inherit it. And we look into it for Android 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it's just the same. Same for iOS. And what I mean is, not that Apple is the evilest evil or villain, but they are all affected. The technology we have nowadays is very complex. We are too dependent on technology, sometimes way too much. And I do fancy technology, I have to say it, but we also need to admit it. And manufacturers, industry as a whole need to get ready. There are things that need to be solved, things that are known for very long, many years, and we need to solve them up. How come a home user can set up a business network when there will be no radios at home, but there is an option that you can only set up with a DMT through the device profile options? It's as simple as that, but it's not done. There is this conspiracy theory underlying. Who knows? You decide, but things need to be solved. More questions? Comments? A few more back there. The one closest to me, ask your question, and then you will take the mic to the next person. Let me explain you how it works. If you go to DinoSec, www.dinosec.com, you go to the app and you see a few presentations and technical data, but that would be it. If you've got the radio server, but you're the false one, almost all Wi-Fi clients for Windows compatibility is clear as the pin as ID system. So you use version number 2, the same as when you have the shred folders on Windows. So with that radius, instead of saying that I have a pin, I say, well, if it's this, I have to change the challenge and response, and it's too big a mess. Why don't you use PUP, which is a protocol that if you are older, back then when we had modems, the ones that had that sound that maybe some of you in the room don't know what I'm talking about, but when we were authenticating, we had PUP and CHAP. It is PUP, the one. So send me the credentials, plain and clear. So if Mr. Radio says I need to send them plain and clear, I do so. No need to crack them, no need to do anything else. It's as sad as that. You said our kids will work in security for sure. In Spain, there is no awareness, but in the US, there's no one Is there someone who's looked into vulnerability and dare to say it out loud? You are risking my security. You are the manufacturer. You need to take care of my security. No one there? I'm no lawyer. I mean not to be a lawyer. I will not get into that turf. But it is true in the industry, not now, but recently, we see who is to be held accountable for many of the vulnerable technologies that we have and that can cause quite a problem. The recent example has been the botnet network for the IoT, where we see that the main surfaces of the internet were crashed, Twitter and others. So the thing is, let's see what the limit to the responsibility is, and we see both worlds are too far apart. We're moving very fast in technology compared to the legal side of it, and we'll see what happens. Even though the US is a good way, whether you get a lung cancer because you're smoking, and even if you knew it because it was advertised on the package, you can also sue the manufacturer. Not the case in Spain, but still there have been no known cases where the responsibility has fallen on the manufacturer. We see what happens. Questions? Good. Most of the users, iPhone users, they use CD for downloading apps. Do they have trustworthy or reliable certificates? Well, let me explain. Most of iPhone users who had not broken their computers, so factory settings, they only download it from the App Store or the techniques I said. If you jailbreak your iPhone for full control, by default you've got Cydia, that is a package manager, and we haven't discussed it because it's opened a new range. Who gives you the apps through Cydia? How reliable are them? They are not. Anyone can distribute those apps. If there's something malicious, they'll remove it, but that's it. I've never said that the malware that was distributed was on jailbroken devices. In that case, the compromise risk is much higher. More questions? Now that with cell phones we can pay, so we can pay with our mobile, NFC with the iPhone and Android. So there's legal implications, as we said before, where depending on the bank, the transaction, and how it is detected, it will be compensated by the bank or not, who knows. And technically, what's the module analysis? Manufacturers try to do it right. And so the most recent Android and iOS have this cryptographic hardware chip that is in charge of those tasks, but it's just another hardware chip that is controlled by software on the OS and firmware, which is software, on the hardware. So there's been some research, but no public research has released any idea that you can pay by tampering with the mobile with NFC, and by, of course, replicating the card. You can. I think there is a speaker later on who will not discuss that topic, but other times he's discussed it, and he's well and knowledgeable. And it's not about the problem. The problem is not about the mobile, but about the wireless technology. So banks understood that need to be pinless wireless payments under 20 euros, and so they take up the risk to make this technology popular. It is just a business decision. Any more questions? If not, so thank you very much to all of you. It's been a pleasure.